I'm Stephen Lacey, a managing editor at Green Tech Media, and I'm here at the Grid Edge World Forum in San Jose, California, joined now by Nathan Adams, who is the general manager of North American Microgrids at ABB, and we are talking about the microgrid market. Hey Nathan, how are you?
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you. I wanted to talk first about the market size for microgrids. You know, we're starting from a small base, but we're seeing pretty strong growth in development of microgrids in this country and in Canada. So tell me what kind of activity you're seeing.
Yeah, I think as a precedent, one of the things I like in this market too is thinking about more recently how the battery storage market has evolved in the U.S. and in the world, right? And you know, as a former developer, I was monitoring that space and in it, and there was this period of time where the buzz was out there and the technology was there, but it took some time for market uptake, right? And I think that's kind of where we are in microgrids, is we're seeing this. You know, there's been a lot of buzz for a couple of years now, and now we're starting to see that first adoption of pilot projects and things where state subsidies are starting to come in and push projects to the fore. So I think we're still in early days, but our view is that, you know, everything has that early curve of adoption, but it's going to take off here in a few years.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that because we do have a decent amount of microgrid capacity already in this country that may have been built decades ago. But what is the new iteration of microgrids?
Yeah.
What's different about the microgrids being developed today that are more in pilot, they're in the pilot scale, and they're materially different in terms of grid integration and the types of energy technologies?
Yeah, I think that, you know, if you look at sort of the existing state of microgrids or the existing inventory in the US, a lot of it has to do with, it was probably stuff that came in and was frankly, even before they called it microgrids, right? It was CHP systems at universities, or it was backup generation. And now we look at that and say, oh, it's a microgrid. And I think as we evolve over time, a lot of the world of microgrids is looking more at a bit more complex system of more interrelated assets. So I think you're going to see a greater mix of generation, a higher penetration of renewables involved in microgrids as opposed to just the thermal setup. And I think it's also going to be about how those assets interact with the marketplace, right? How do you take the right technology and software to make those assets valuable the rest of the time when they're not islanding the system?
So the definition of a microgrid is changing.
Yeah, I think the definition of a microgrid is still up in the air and up to interpretation a bit, but I think it's really about changing the face. I think it's thinking about how renewables has dropped down the cost curve. I think it's talking about storage as it also has dropped down the cost curve, and how they start to mingle together to make a different sort of profile of microgrid.
Let's talk about the role that these microgrids can play on the larger grid. You know, they can provide valuable backup power, but they can also be good citizens of the grid as well, and these technologies can play in concert to provide grid services. How much more sophisticated are these projects in terms of providing value for on-site customers and the grid at large?
Yeah, I think it's become a layer of sophistication that you have to engage now, and it has to do with not only the technology and how you dispatch assets in a way that optimizes their use and optimizes the economics, but it's also about, to some extent, the commercial relationships of how you extract value as a microgrid owner vis-a-vis your relationship with a local utility. Because inevitably you're going to be providing services to them that are of value, and how you work with that load service provider to have an exchange of service for value. And so there's a lot of, in addition to that technical piece of how you automate this and make it all possible, there's this sort of debate or discussion about how we collaborate as utility and microgrid owner, or if they're the same thing or different, and come to a conclusion about value for service.